Welcome, everybody. You are in the right place because we know you care. This is your show, Who Cares with CARES Foundation by Todd Lingel. The story goes that CARES is a foundation name provided by Todd's deceased mother and sister. They were killed as a result of a collision caused by a driver practicing drunk driving. So we're here with Todd's passion to go out there and to help save as many lives as he can. But it's the old thing. If we do all this to save one life, it's worth it. So here we're going to bring forward Todd Lingel. And here we go. Todd, come on in.
Hey, all
This
right.
is
Thanks,
this is
Kurt.
our Who Cares show. Let's do it up. I
Wow.
hear the topic is going to be grief, but go ahead and share more about yourself and everything with CARES Foundation, and we'll come back to your topic of grief for today.
Sounds great. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. And those that are going to view this, thank you. I want to tell you a little bit about CARES Foundation. And the name CARES, Kares, came about. My mom's name is Karen. That's where Kare came from. And S from my sister Shelly. So that's where CARES came from. So they died June 14th, 1975. My mom was 30. My sister was 6. And I was 3. My brother was 9. He was in the back seat, and he did survive. And growing up, and then it was the old adage of buck up, buttercup. You just kind of put things in a box and moved forward. You didn't go to counseling, didn't do anything like that. So I always felt growing up like there was something there. I didn't know what it was, that feeling was. I had no clue what it was. And as I went in life in my mid 30s through a divorce, I got depressed and went on some medications that made me worse. And I almost committed suicide. Had a shotgun in my mouth. Thankfully, yes, I did not. Yeah. And, I called my doctor it was that Friday evening, called my doctor and said, "Hey, this is what just happened." And it just freaked me out. And so I went into her office and on that next Monday, and I said, "Hey," I said, "I'm done with medications. I want to go to a Christian counselor. I grew up going to non-denominational Christian church. I believe in God. And between the three of us, we can figure out what this feeling is." So that's what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about grief. And, a lot of people are not feeling good about things in their life. And grief actually touches in a lot of different ways. I've been doing some more research than what I did when I was going through it. Um, but let's go with what is grief. Grief, and I'm just going to read this here. Grief is the emotional suffering and distress that people experience when they lose something or someone important to them. So grief can come in lots of different forms of losing a loved one, getting a divorce because that marriage, you're losing that marriage, a lot of different things like that. And as I did research, I didn't know this before. Um, Actually, in 1969, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, MD, introduced the 5 stages of grief to help explain how people emotionally respond to loss. So I think from my research, she was the first one to bring in the 5 stages of grief. And I've mentioned, I think even on the show, that I went through the 7 stages of grief and the 5 stages of grief. So there's both are there now. So I was almost when I talked about that before. It's like, man, am I a little bit confused? Is there 5 or 7? And there's actually both that are being brought out now. But the starting of it by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the 5 stages of grief. So number 1, denial, not believing the loss has happened. Who, man, you know, I'm gonna go. I can go in each one of these, but I'm gonna go down through all of them here: anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I'm just gonna talk a little bit about when I started going through things, because it's not necessarily do you have to go through them all, step by step by step. They can be commingled in there, and you could start off with some other place. So, like for me, when I went into the counseling, um, it was, I would have to say, not in denial because I knew my mom and sister had been gone for a long time. Mine was anger. That was the huge thing for me because I was angry. I was angry at everybody. I mean, I was short tempered. People that knew me back then were going like, wow, man, yeah, you were not the nicest person ever. And I wasn't because of everything I was going through. I was mad at my dad. I was mad at the drunk driver still. I was mad at just lots of people. And so I had to, first thing I went in, I remember talking about being angry and what that was all about. And, I didn't know where it was coming from. And as we got to talk more and more, and she asked questions, and talking about my mom and sister being killed, and then not talking about her, and not being able to really, I didn't see much family on my mom's side. My grandma once a year, probably at Christmas, and my uncle that lived 15 minutes away from us, maybe once every year or once every 2 years. And so I was angry. I was angry at everybody, and I didn't know why. And so we went clear back to when I was 3. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh man, you can't do that when you go back when you're 3." Well, we did go back to when I was 3, and talked about things that is growing up, kind of about the my childhood. And as we got to talking, we actually talked about how I felt about my mom and sister not being around anymore. And at first, it was just superficial. It's like, yeah, okay, I don't really believe this, kind of thing. And as I got into it and she started asking me more questions. It started opening up of, I don't really know my mom, who my mom, my sister really were. And one pivotal point in my life, my grandmother on my mom's side, I think I was the year after I graduated high school. I got hired on by Bureau of Land Management to fight fires. And I was going to go through fire school in Boise, Idaho, and that's where my grandma lived. And I talked to my grandma, and I said, "Hey," I said, "can I stay with you when I come to fire school, and I can ask you some questions about mom?" And she goes, "Absolutely." And so it wasn't, oh man, it wasn't even a couple months later. My step grandfather was in the hospital dying of cancer. My grandma, I guess, was having some heart pains and told her sister that, but didn't told her not to say anything. Well, my grandma died like 2 days later, something like that, from a massive heart attack in the middle of the night. And so that was oh man, you talk about a huge loss for me. I went to my grandma's funeral, and I remember walking up to view her at the last, and I just started bawling, uncontrollable crying. And I remember I think it was my uncle and somebody else picking me up, and because I just collapsed, and literally I could not handle anything, because that was my last connection to my mom. The real true person that could answer all the questions that I had was through that. So when that counseling, when she was asking me, we went and talked about my grandma, and that was if you say the way to get my emotions started, that got me into really diving into my mom and my sister and grieving them. That was, if you will, the tunnel that got to the opening to be able to talk. And so when I won't ever forget just that time, and it kind of gives me chills now talking about it, because that was, I would have to say, really the turning point in my life that started my healing process. And again, mine wasn't with denial. Mine was started with the anger part. And that anger part, oh man, it stayed for quite a long time. I was angry. I would go through being angry at my dad, for not doing certain things. I'd be angry at my grandma because she died. How am I getting angry at my grandma? It's crazy, but that's what I went through. And so I'll pause for a second, because people that are watching, or who will watch this, if you're in a time in your life that you feel kind of stuck, you don't know where to go, and things, you've maybe lost somebody, but you kind of like just put it in the back burner, there is some time in your life that you're going to have to deal with it. It's just going to keep festering and festering until you actually, just like a pimple, eventually it's going to have to go away. You have to deal with it. And if you feel that, I urge you to go talk to a professional. I am not a professional. I am just, my feelings of what I go through, but you need to go talk to a professional, get some help. if you need help finding a professional, you can always call us at Cares Foundation. And my personal cell phone number, I'll just give that to you now. It's 541-490-5171. So I'll move on now a little bit. So bargaining, it's trying to make deals or changes to avoid the loss. I think I was probably in that bargaining before I even knew it. Probably growing up, I was in that bargaining of, well, everything's okay. That feeling I've got, oh, it's nothing. And so I just kind of kept going back and forth and not wanting to get help. Maybe when I maybe realized that I needed to get help, it was 6 months of no, I'm okay, I'm good, kind of thing. I think that's where I was caught in, and maybe some of you that are watching have experienced this before. Depression, man, I was already depressed because of everything that I had been going through. So again, all this, like, I think I had depression, anger, all at once, and then bargaining to actually, no, I don't really need help, that kind of thing. If I did this little thing, it'd be okay. Um, and so once again, it was that time where I just, bam, it hit me that I can start mourning my mom and sister death. That's, like I said, was the point of my recovery and realizing, I think at that point, the depression, the anger, the bargaining, the acceptance, I think all came in at one time. It was all together for me. And that time, like I said, when I realized that, hey, that was my grandma, talking about grandma, was a tunnel to open up. It's like a flood of emotion came to me, and almost if you take a deep breath and let the breath out, it's like, it feels so good. That's kind of what I felt. And it just, I know it's hard to explain everything that I went through, and I know individuals that have gone through it. It is hard to explain, but I guess after that time and we got to open things up, I really started to feel again, and I think I started to feel maybe for the first time, because ever since 3 years old, it was a part of me, and I don't know that I really truly felt at that point until I got through some more counseling. And it took 4 years. I went through 4 years. This was not a slow process. I mean, a fast process. It was slow. And learning myself from the inside out, learning that those feelings that I had growing up were legitimate. They were going to be with me for the rest of my life unless God decides to take them away from me. And what those were was general anxiety and separation anxiety. So as I grew up and I was older and had kids and got divorced, and I dropped kids off, and I immediately, like within 5 minutes or less, I would have emotion. I would start crying. And I'm like, why in the heck am I crying? I know I love my kids, but this is like, something's not right. I always felt like that was something wrong. And so that was that separation anxiety that I learned about. And it was, I was afraid that something was going to happen to them. Yeah. And even in marriage, my wife would go away and I would call, and it wasn't the fact that I was checking on her, because I wasn't. It was the fact that I was afraid that something was going to happen. And so that all made sense. It's like, oh man, that makes perfect sense why I have these feelings when I leave my kids. And and I get that. I still have that today. I leave, like visiting my dad and my stepmom. I leave and it's like, oh man, I leave friends, or I even have it when I have a great weekend. Say well, my girlfriend and I went on a trip to California not too long ago, and the next day it's like, boom, hit me. It's like, wow, I'm getting this from that. So it's what the counseling does is allowed me to recognize everything, and so I can deal with it. But it's like, man, I didn't realize that it comes in this form as well. So I'm learning new things about myself all the time. And so that was a separation anxiety. And then general anxiety for me is when I get overwhelmed with lots of things, having to do lots of things. And then my body starts to shut down. I start to I just be a recluse. I pull back in, and I will not really talk to many people. And it's like, okay, I realize that's the way I'm into it, go into it and things now. And so I have to really think hard and try to get myself out of that. If it's a point that I can't get myself out of it, I'll call someone, talk to them, just try to get myself doing something to get myself out of that headspace. And I do the self-talk, things that I've been taught. Um, so, anybody that is going through anything like this, any portion or stage of the different stages of grief, uh, I urge you to get some help. And again, I'll reach out to us, and we can get you in touch with people. I know multiple counselors where you can get some help. I wanted to bring in that was the 5 stages of grief that I talked about. I wanted to just talk about the 7 stages of grief that's come out now, and just tell you what those are. So it's kind of a little bit different. It might hit someone differently. So number 1 here is the shock and denial. And I lost a friend of mine here not too long ago, and I think that it was unexpected. That's that shock factor, and the denial. Maybe, man, they can't be gone. That type of a thing. Number 2, pain and guilt. 3, anger and bargaining. 4, depression. 5, the upward turn. 6, reconstruction and working through, and then 7, there is acceptance and hope. And I wanted to talk about this upward turn just a little bit, just to say what it is. The upward turn, because I didn't understand what they were saying. And it says, you may feel that you are in a calmer and more relaxed state as the feelings of pain and anger start to subside. So they kind of added that in there as just an upward turn, is what they call it. And let's see here, got some other notes. Reconstruction and working through it. At this point, you will start to feel like you begin to put the pieces of your life back together and move forward. That isn't to say you won't still experience moments of sadness, but you feel you can now start to put one foot in front of the other and look ahead. That right there is true for me, as far as when I came out of the counseling, or in the still the 4-year counseling. My anger didn't stop immediately. I still had some anger, because I was still upset of what was going on. I didn't let that go. And it was harder for me to let that go. And I guess that was probably harder for me to let that go because it became a friend of mine, I guess, if you will, over the years. That's just the way I guess I was. And I didn't realize that. And, I went to a friend of mine that had I'll probably know me for, I don't know, 5-6 years, something like that. And I asked him, I said, how come you never ask me what I was going through? And I said, because I was an angry person. I said, that wasn't normally me. And he goes, yeah, I saw that. And I said, well, how come you didn't come ask me? And he just kind of looked at me like, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't. He said, I'm sorry. After I told him what I was going through and the counseling that I was getting. And so I urge you, the individuals out there, that if you have somebody that you see this doesn't have their normal, how they act or anything like that, or you see a pattern, ask those people, because that could be a person that is close to committing suicide. If you have that feeling inside, talk to them. The number out there for suicide is the 988. Have it on my phone. Get those individuals help. Here at CARES Foundation, not only do we help kids and want to save kids' lives, we're helping veterans as well. I have met a gentleman, a good friend of mine now, and he's going to be helping out at CARES Foundation more. He's a 22-year retired chief, Special Forces from the Navy. And so you just never know who you're talking to. And if somebody wants to talk to you out on the street and they're feeling like, you feel like, oh man, they're just whatever, they're not feeling good, and they're talking different things, get them help. Even if you have to call the police, if they're out and about, because the police are actually there to help individuals. So, and I again, I'll reiterate this. I'll go off subject a little bit. I'll go back to where we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is communication. Parents, it is very vital that you talk to your teenagers, because They go through a lot of things, peer pressure, all those different things in high school. Talk to them and ask them questions. Take them out on a date night with your daughter, your son, and just get to know them to where they're not afraid to talk to you. Because if we're more have that open communication, it's going to be better all in all. That if they go through something like this grief, um, then they can get help. Because, like I said, there's lots of things that can trigger grief. Of course, the main one is losing somebody, but it's maybe they didn't get on a sports team. Maybe they lost some other way. There's different types of ways the grief can come up, and just be mindful when you're talking to somebody that they could be needing help, and don't be afraid to ask them. So I know I've talked a lot here, Kurt. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to our subject today?
Why didn't you reach out to share what was going on with you?
Why didn't I reach out to share? As far as when? As far as that the gentleman that I was talking to?
Yeah, I just want to dive into this dynamic. You talked to a
Yeah.
person and said, why didn't you ask me what was going on? Well, why didn't you share with that person?
I have always been the person that wants to help others, and it's hard for me to ask for help. And so I've always felt like I would um, be a hindrance by asking. And so I kind of just kept to myself what I was going through. And so, that could have been, I guess that could have been, thinking about it now, it could have been a denial. And I probably have some of that today, this day. I don't want to bother people. I've talked to you a little bit about it. I don't want to bother people that are asking to help me. And I've got to think back like, okay, hang on a second now. They want to help. That's what we're all here for, is to help and save lives, bottom line. And I'm not allowing people to do that for me. And so I'm a work in progress. All of us are a work in progress. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But one thing I am is, if somebody brings it up, okay, all right, yeah, you got it. That's me right now. And let's figure it out and move in a different direction. So um, I guess that's the other thing. And that's a great question to ask me, Kurt. I appreciate that. Um, it's and that's what I can say too, is don't be afraid, or don't get offensive if someone asks you if you're okay. Uh, and if you're not okay and you just say, "Oh yeah, I'm fine," don't do that. Don't do that. That's just taking the issue that you need to deal with, and just putting it down the line. And like I said, eventually you're going to have to deal with it. I didn't know I was doing that from the point I was 3 years old till I was mid 30s. And I remember my counselor saying something to me. It was interesting, that you will probably have to deal with somebody or something. You have to deal with something at the age the person was that passed away. It was interesting to me, because I was like in my mid 30s when this all happened. My mom was 30 when she died. So that was crazy how that is out there. I'd never heard of that before. Um, so go ahead, Kurt. That was a great question. Shoot some more at me.
Well, I mean, I guess the way I look at it is, these disruptions in life, a loss of a loved one, there is nothing greater that we experience in life than love. And when we have that source of love and that energy that is everything that the person represents, and now they're deceased, and now you go to a viewing, and we see their body laying there, and we're missing that personality, that energy, that love, that source of everything that person was for us. That there's a loss, and there's a tremendous energy shift. And I even think of Albert Einstein in physics, and talking about every action has an equal but opposite reaction. So all this stuff that you just described, up to this point is all, like Albert Einstein also said, it takes 10 times the amount of energy to bring something back on its intended path as compared to if it stays on that trajectory all along.
Right.
So to me, when you talk about, we have a disruption and it knocks us off our path. Well, if we keep having, you know, two wrongs, still not making that right, we're not taking the functional reaction to that grief. We're getting further and further out. And now we're experiencing all this energy that it takes to get on a path that we perceive we could be on. And we're very aware of this deviation. And now there's a lot of guilt.
Yeah. Yep.
And they say anger um ties into shame. So when we are so aware of, you know how much we have to really work at finding out, why is it I did a this and a this and a this and that, and I just did one unhealthy thing after another. Why am I so far over here? To
Yeah.
me, without it being part of the process or anything, if we really get into the lowest common denominator, there's an element of shame.
Yeah.
And I'm able to speak to these things because people like you, Todd, are able to, in how you share what you do and how you are bringing out tools in the toolbox. I mean, you've like opened up this, big ginormous megaplex, and you filled this megaplex with all sorts of tools. It's like an Amazon warehouse of all these tools that you have, but you just kind of reach in, you just kind of say, over here we've got this set of things, and you bring it out of this warehouse and you say, all right, we're going to look at this right now. And that's what you just did right there. So I kind of describe all of this because in a lot of circles, people are really driving home the importance of linguistics. And earlier today, um, I was on a program that included, I'm going to say, a cancer survivor, but that's not entirely everything about the identity of herself that was brought out in this session earlier today. But the thing in the cancer survivor part of herself is, it was very interesting how she, in her life, built up this notion and this knack for saying, okay, this cancer is here, but I don't identify with it. So it was very much a part of, this cancer doesn't serve me. So I'm moving forward to help this cancer just go. I don't need this cancer. And
Right.
with that type of mantra and mindset, you know, she's very celebratory today that everything returned back, the way that she needs it. And it was just very interesting, no matter what you believe. And, if you're very medical and scientific, you might be like, that just might be a, an emotional, story that went along with how it really medically happened, but I do subscribe to this thing of quantum physics and how we're all energy, because I was trained in what I do to look at, atoms make us up. We're a ball of matter, and
Right.
atoms make up matter. And so you have the neutron, electron, and the proton. And the electron, or the electron is circling there. And so this energy is what's really important to unleash the power within. And another session I was on today, the group was describing like definiteness of purpose. And whether you're doing something destructive or something constructive, when you have that definite purpose and you have that dedication, devotion, and you're putting everything, you put all your energy into it, what you're thinking about and everything will manifest. So
Yeah.
I bring that out to say that there is a risk in the trade that you have taken on, Todd, and for these messages to get out there, we need to really put the warning label on. Don't let reviewing and understanding these tools in the toolbox run you the risk of victimology, because now you can add to it, you can start to express things that describe a victimology, like you're a victim of circumstance, your own circumstance. And just like if somebody else perpetrated a crime against you, there's all
Yeah.
of that. And that becomes what it starts to look like, is the person that's deceased, all of a sudden you're the victim of them passing away,
Right.
and so there's an opportunity here to try to give a proper context to the content that is grieving and working things out, which, when you're in the throes of it, it is what it is for all of us. And
Yeah.
all of us don't work through it to the level that it could be, including myself. These
Yeah.
conversations are very instructive to me, because being in this show gives me more awareness of myself, and where I did not benefit from those that have passed away in my life.
Yeah.
I tell the story about, I used to be an EMT, and a fellow EMT who also is was a very amazing community person, a member at our church, the church that I go to. And through the Lions Club and stuff like this, I didn't really know. It's not like I became friends with him or anything, but he's just someone that I connected to, in community, where I
Hmm.
just respected that person that I knew in the community. I knew his name, very familiar. So if his name came up, I could participate in the conversation very readily about him. And then here we lost him to suicide. Now, at the time, I wouldn't have said it that way. At the
Yeah.
time, I joined what most people do, and I had to be taught in the last 10 years, a healthier way and a more just way to describe that is to say we lost them to suicide, but many say committed suicide. Or if they're a suicide survivor, we say they failed at suicide, that they had that they had a suicide attempt,
Right.
and say, let's get away from some of that wording, because it makes it like a person really has an objective to do that. So you've been in the throes of suicide ideation. So it's not
Yeah.
that you really were attempting suicide or you were on the verges of committing suicide. We almost lost you almost lost your life to suicide. So it is a circumstance you're in, and it's an energetic, and it changes how all of your hormones work and how the condition of the brain during that time, it all
Yeah.
changes, that it drops your survival instinct. And that's where you're at that point where, functionally speaking, the damage to your bodily function, your physiology and everything,
Yeah.
it's malfunctioning. Things are misfiring, and it's not, your body is not operating properly, and you're in this place where, like you can say out of body experience and whatever. Not that that's
Yeah.
what that is, but there are these things as people that we can start doing things that aren't in our own character. They can kind of get off the rails. We can get off the rails. And to your point about people being more attentive, it's about the space that we give. So, like with you, Todd, how much do I give you the space to say that if with CARES Foundation, if there's things that need done and it's on your mind on a Thursday afternoon, Todd, give me a call. You
Right.
have that space. This is what we're doing together. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of what's important, because sometimes we say I'm fine because we're not sure that that door really is open for that.
Yeah.
It's, you kind
True.
of feel like, you know, kind of like when you see each other on the community at a grocery store, and you kind of see a friend who's kind of returning back to the car, and we're like, they may have something to go off to. So we just make it a quick hi bye and, have a great day. And we don't break out in conversation because they may have to go off to something, until somebody says, "Oh, I'm just out here because I got time. I got plenty of time. This was a great time." And,
Yeah.
and say, I'd love to catch up with you. Can we go back to my car and we talk a little bit? Until we do that. And this is something I had to learn about 20 years ago. someone else taught me a lot about bringing people along and finding that space for people to do the same thing you're doing and to check in with them. Is that something that they would like and benefit from, to be with you on a meeting, an event, an activity? And, if we don't do those types of things, like you said, we typically don't like to impose or to be a
Right.
burden, and such like that. So to that point, I want to bring up a name, Kathy Weaver. Now you now know Kathy Weaver, right? All
Yep.
right. So I just want to bring out, since you're familiar with her, on her page, there's some wording. We are not finished yet with the mission of helping others. So my final footprint was born. Now, this is a book, September 23rd. This ebook is available at no cost at www.myfinalfootprints.com and may serve as a conversation starter regarding the gathering implementations of one's final wishes. Kathy is happy to speak virtually to your organization about the subject that few are comfortable discussing. Death, by the way, of her numerous experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm also
Yeah.
going to read something else from her website, with the book, He Hit the Clouds Running book. There's so many ways to cope with death of a loved one, and this book is some insight into how I was able to manage when we experience something that eventually everyone must go through. I find it most helpful to share what works and certainly what may not. And yes, each of us is very different when it comes to the topic of death and this journey called grief. Feel free to visit my YouTube channel playlist, He Hit the Clouds Running, and hear all 6 selections of He Hit the Clouds Running and Never Look Back, so you too may be inspired to help someone you know and love through their own personal bereavement process. In this book, I allow the reader to earn their PhDD, which means personally having dealt with death degree. Once you listen to it, you'll totally understand why. What do you think about that, Todd?
Oh, that's awesome. I did not realize she had that there. So, yeah, people go on Kathy Weaver's site, and yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Kurt, for putting it up there in the chat. And yeah, it's I'm glad you said what you said, Kurt. I appreciate that. And you know, I'll add this on, and it's just kind of a little, not a real funny story, but my grandma had a sense of humor. My grandma on my dad's side, my grandma Lingel, she lived to 100 and a half, I believe. And growing up, because I lost my mom, she was like my mom, interim mom, and so I was really close to my grandma. And so talking with her, in her 90s, I said, Grandma, when you pass, I said, I really don't want to go to your funeral, because at that point, funerals still bother me today. I don't know how I'm going to react to them when I go. And I said, I don't really want to come to your funeral. I want to remind you like you are right now. So I made it a point, every time I left my grandma, I told her I loved her. And so, she got up a little older and older. And I, one day I said, Grandma, we talked about this. If you pass away, I'm not going to be at your funeral. She goes, well, I don't think I'm going to care. And she said that with a straight face and then started laughing. And I'm like, Grandma, only you could say that stuff. And she goes, you might want to talk to your dad, though. He might have a different story. So, but I talked to my dad, and he understood that. But my grandma had that sense of humor. And again, anybody that's out there watching this today, um, listening anywhere, please reach out to get help if you're going through something, because we don't want to lose anybody else. Um, and it's okay to ask for help. Like, again, I'm still doing that because Kurt's asked me what he can do for me, and I'm like, I'm okay. And no, I need help. We all need help with things, and I want to truly save lives. That's what we're about at Cares Foundation, and I cannot do it by myself. Um, we have to raise funds for our care camp cares that we're trying to do. to help kids understand, no matter where they're at, if they are living in the projects or they live in a mansion, all of us have feelings and we all need help at some point in our life. And it's how you deal with it is how, and how you come out of it, really. You get it, we're all going to have a story, but it's how you come out of it and how you can thrive. And that's what we want to help kids to stop having to go through something like getting drunk and driving and killing a friend in their car, maybe, or someone else, or going down a choice. I tell kids that you have all of us have a choice to turn right and do something good or turn left and do something bad. And I tell kids in group homes that, hey, they have that decision to make early in life, which is, I think, an advantage, because you have now that point of moving forward quicker than kids that are still at home. They don't know what life's about yet. So I know we're over on time. I appreciate the conversation today. Anyone that's watching, again, reach out to us. My personal cell phone number is 541-490-5171. I've kept my Oregon number, so that's why it's 541. Call me anytime. I will get you help if you need help. We'll talk, go through anything you'd like to. And if you go on our website at carestoday.org, that's with a K, Kares today.org. We'd appreciate you taking a look at the website. And if you could help us out with a donation, we are a 501c3, so your donation is tax deductible. And again, we thank you so much for being on our podcast today. Who cares? We care.